Impressionism is the most popular art movement of all time, which is easy to see when you consider how much people will pay for these paintings. Like this portrait of Dr. Gachet by Vincent van Gogh, the Japanese businessman who paid $82.5 million for it, loved it so much he wanted to be cremated with it when he died. Luckily, he didn't get that dying wish. This familiar Renoir, called The Ball at the Moulin de la Galette, sold for a whopping $78 million. So what makes Impressionism and Post-Impressionism so special?
Well, people like to look at it.
Why?
Because it's pretty.
But when it first arrived on the Paris art scene, Impressionism was not so well received. The official French style, as shown in the annual Paris Salon exhibition, was realistic and accurate and proper. This was the time of Napoleon III, or Louis Napoleon, and realistic portraits and historical paintings were in. Landscapes and still lifes were out. The artist who first challenged the conventions of the Salon was Edouard Manet. His Olympia shocked the crowd when it was first exhibited in 1865. It wasn't that the Paris art world couldn't handle a nude woman, they just couldn't handle a nude prostitute looking so sure of herself. It brought one of those don't ask, don't tell issues to the light of day, and it also signaled to other artists that maybe it was time to break out of the box. Manet's subjects ranged, but he seemed to allow his women subjects a look out of the canvas. The next art world shocker was Monet's Impression Sunrise. The title of the painting was mocked by a snotty Paris art critic, and the term Impressionism was born. So why did Monet start painting in this style?
'Cause he wanted to.
Well, some say the invention of the photographic camera might have had something to do with it. The first photographic image ever recorded happened in France in the hand of Joseph Niepce. It was a grainy view of Paris rooftops. If a camera could record an impression, why couldn't painters? Or maybe it was that as the technique of photography improved, who needed artists to make realistic portraits? In any case, the camera certainly caused a stir in the art world. But for Monet, another invention was the key to a big change. Monet loved the outdoors, and with the invention of the tin paint tube, he could combine his two loves, nature and art. With the changing light, Monet knew he had to paint fast. No time for all those layers of paint drying in the studio over weeks. For heaven's sake, just paint it all at once. Monet painted light and color, recording the same scene as many as 30 times. This is Rouen Cathedral, but the real subject was changing daylight. Other artists followed suit, like Renoir, who painted alongside Monet. In fact, this is a Renoir of Monet painting. Renoir used the Impressionist style to create happy scenes. He was a pretty social guy and seemed to be interested in how people interacted with each other. Edgar Degas was also interested in people interacting, but he had a fascination with ballet dancers. He must have spent a lot of hours in those dance studios. Hey, Monet had his gardens. Another artist who spent a lot of time looking at dancers was Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec, but his dancers were not the socially acceptable ballet type. Lautrec hung out in bawdy nightclubs like the Moulin Rouge and painted scenes from the seamier side of life. On the more innocent side of things, Impressionism saw two female artists make their marks. American Mary Cassatt and French artist Berthe Morisot both portrayed female subjects often interacting with children. Yes, this was the life of proper ladies of the day, though perhaps not as exciting as kicking up your heels at the Moulin Rouge. As Impressionism became more of an accepted style, there was a kind of midlife crisis among Impressionist artists, who began to seek and follow more individual inspiration and drifted away from simply recording impressions of light and color. Pointillists like Georges Seurat were anything but instantaneous with their style of dots. Instead, their paintings looked like a color study, and they were pretty stiff and flat. Color was pushed past the natural limits by post-impressionist artists like Paul Gauguin, who ironically set out to reunite man with nature in his paintings. His quest took him as far as Tahiti, where he loved to paint the noble savage. Arrogant much? Henri Rousseau had no formal training in art. He worked in an office, and he didn't get a lot of respect while he was painting, but now we see his art was really interesting. The most famous post-impressionist, of course, was Vincent van Gogh, a troubled guy who just wanted to help people. Vincent spiraled like his starry skies into a suicidal depression. His famous ear job was a symptom of a mental illness that surely would have been treated with today's pharmaceutical resources. But no such relief came before Van Gogh took his own life in a wheat field in the south of France. In his last 10 years, when he was concentrating only on painting, Van Gogh produced over 1,000 paintings, but sold only one. Speaking of depressing, what was the deal with Picasso in the Blue period? This wasn't really considered post-impressionism, but he was working in Paris around the same time, so it's worth noting. Picasso was blue because of the suicide of a close friend, but it wasn't Van Gogh. And he chose some pretty unhappy people to depict in his work, using art to express emotions. Imagine that! Mental illness also cast a shadow over the great Impressionist sculptor Auguste Rodin, whose lover and assistant Claudel went a bit mad. But not before Rodin produced his greatest sculptures of the Thinker and the Kiss. Paul Cézanne's working style began to hint at the later development of Cubism, as he simplified complex forms and painted with patches and slabs of paint. His favorite subject, just outside his studio window, was Mont Sainte-Victoire, which he painted more than 60 times before his death in 1906. Of course, there's lots more Impressionist artists than the ones I've showed you here, so get a book or go online and look up Impressionism. Why?
Because it's pretty.